Hello and welcome to another enlightening episode of Speak Up. I'm Ryan, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on this transformative journey to English fluency. Whether you're a first-time listener or a long-time fan, today's conversation is crafted especially for you. We're here to explore a powerful idea. Stop thinking, start talking. Many of us get stuck overthinking every word, worried about making mistakes or not sounding perfect. But what if I told you that the fastest way to learn English fast is to simply jump in and start speaking? Today, we're breaking down the barriers that hold you back and showing you how to speak English confidently. We'll share practical strategies that work for both English for beginners and those looking to polish their advanced skills. In this episode, we'll touch on essential tips like English speaking tips and effective methods such as the shadowing technique for fluency that help you think in English rather than constantly translating. Our goal is to make your learning process more natural, engaging, and ultimately successful. So get ready to embrace real-life conversation practice, build your vocabulary, and discover how each step forward makes your language journey that much more exciting.
Hi everyone, I'm Priya, and I couldn't be more excited to join Ryan on this incredible journey to break free from hesitation and unlock your potential in English. Today, we're diving into the practical side of language learning, focusing on how to move from overthinking to confident conversation. Imagine stepping into your next conversation without the fear of stumbling over words or worrying about common English mistakes. Our discussion is all about taking action, turning those nerves into energy that fuels your ability to learn English fast and enjoy every moment of daily English conversation. We'll be sharing proven techniques that help you improve English fluency, whether it's through practicing English listening exercises to better understand native speakers or mastering English grammar made easy tips that streamline your communication. From exploring how to think in English to uncovering strategies for how to speak English without hesitation, this conversation is packed with insights tailored for everyone, from beginners to advanced learners. So let's dive in together, immerse ourselves in real-life conversation practice, and set the stage for a more confident, fluent, and engaging way to speak English.
Let's dive right in. One of the biggest challenges for English learners is the habit of overthinking. I remember when I was first learning, I'd pause for what felt like forever, worried that every word might be wrong. This overthinking slowed my progress and hampered my confidence, making it hard to learn English fast. I used to rehearse sentences in my head endlessly, which only made me more anxious about speaking. Over time, I discovered that making mistakes is part of the learning process. Embracing these mistakes, rather than fearing them, helped me to overcome fear of speaking English. I started using methods like the shadowing technique for fluency and regular English listening practice to immerse myself in natural conversation patterns. These techniques shifted my focus from perfection to communication, letting me flow with the conversation even when I stumbled on common English mistakes. It was a transformative experience that taught me the value of starting to speak without overanalyzing every word.
I completely resonate with that, Ryan. Overthinking can create a mental block that stops us from making progress. I used to be so scared of committing those small errors during conversations, constantly checking if I was following English grammar made easy rules. I remember a moment at a casual meetup when I froze, worrying about every potential mistake, and it affected the natural rhythm of the discussion. But then I shifted my approach, embracing a mindset that every error is just a stepping stone. I began to see that each mistake was an opportunity to learn, not a failure. I practiced how to speak English without hesitation by engaging in real-life English conversations, and even tried English conversation practice alone to build my confidence. This new approach not only helped me improve my fluency, but also allowed me to think more in English rather than translating every sentence in my head. That shift has been key in helping me speak more naturally and confidently.
Building on that, one effective strategy I found is setting small, manageable goals for every conversation. For example, I might challenge myself to include a new phrase or a couple of English idioms and phrases in my chat. This tactic forces me to step out of my comfort zone and speak more spontaneously, reducing that inner critic gradually. I also incorporate daily English conversation exercises into my routine, even if it's just a brief 10-minute monologue when I'm alone. These short bursts of practice remind me that the focus should be on communicating rather than achieving perfection. Every time I stumble over a word or mix up a tense, I see it as progress. Addressing common English mistakes head-on builds resilience and moves me closer to my goal of speaking confidently. It's about continuously pushing yourself to talk more, which is ultimately the fastest way to improve English fluency.
Absolutely, Ryan. Changing the way we approach speaking can make all the difference. I started to shift my mindset from trying to be perfect to simply expressing my ideas, which meant thinking in English rather than constantly translating. One particular moment that stands out was when I deliberately allowed myself to speak imperfectly during a discussion. I used simple English pronunciation tips and focused on the flow of conversation instead of worrying about every grammatical detail. This approach not only made the conversation more natural, but also freed me to engage more fully with the speaker. I began to appreciate that every conversation is a practice ground, a space where common English mistakes are just milestones on the road to fluency. Embracing these small errors has been a huge confidence booster, reinforcing that every effort to speak is a victory in itself. It's this mindset shift that truly transforms the learning process, making it both engaging and effective for anyone eager to speak English confidently.
Next, let's talk about the power of daily conversation practice and how it can truly transform your journey in learning English. One of the most effective ways to learn English fast is by engaging in daily English conversation. It's like a daily workout for your language skills. Every time you speak, you're training your brain to think in English, not just translate from your native language. I remember when I first started, I set aside time each day to talk about simple topics, even if it was just to myself. That practice helped me build muscle memory for common phrases and boosted my confidence significantly. Whether you're engaging in real-life English conversations with friends or practicing English conversation. Practice alone, every minute spent speaking is a step towards fluency. I used to worry about making common English mistakes, but I realized that each mistake was a learning opportunity. Incorporating practical English-speaking tips, like using everyday scenarios and topics, made the process enjoyable and relatable. The key is consistency. Making speaking a daily habit can dissolve your fear and help you speak English confidently. When you talk regularly, you start noticing improvements in pronunciation, vocabulary, and even grammar without the pressure of perfection. It's about taking that leap and trusting yourself to grow through regular practice.
Absolutely, Ryan. I've experienced firsthand how daily practice can change your mindset about speaking English. For me, setting aside time every day for daily English conversation became the cornerstone of my progress. I used to be nervous about initiating conversations, but I found that when I practiced speaking, whether it was through small talk with a colleague or even a monologue while commuting, I started feeling more at ease. Engaging in real-life English conversations not only sharpened my fluency, but also helped me absorb natural expressions and English idioms and phrases that textbooks often overlook. I also embraced English conversation practice alone. I'd record myself speaking and listen back to identify areas for improvement, which gradually boosted my self-assurance. This solo practice was incredibly liberating because it allowed me to experiment with new vocabulary and sentence structures without fear of judgment. Every conversation, no matter how small, contributed to my journey of learning to speak English confidently. I realized that regular speaking practice, even if it's imperfect, is far more beneficial than worrying about every minor error. It's all about progress over perfection, and every spoken word builds your confidence further.
Building on what you just shared, Priya, let's dive into some practical English-speaking tips that can help anyone kickstart their daily conversation routine. One tip I swear by is to choose a specific time each day dedicated solely to speaking in English. This could be during your morning routine or even on a short walk. The idea is to transform conversation into a habit, much like your daily cup of tea. For instance, Try discussing your day's plans or narrating your surroundings as you go about your routine. This not only enhances your observation skills, but also gradually conditions you to think in English. Additionally, consider setting mini challenges for yourself, like using one new English idiom and phrase every day, or trying out a brief, real-life English conversation on a new topic. If you're not always in a situation where you can converse with others, don't worry. English conversation practice alone is a powerful tool too. Stand in front of a mirror, simulate conversations, or even speak to your pet if you have one. These practices remove the fear of making mistakes and let you experiment with your tone and pronunciation. Over time, these small steps accumulate, and you'll notice a remarkable improvement in your fluency. Remember, the goal isn't to be perfect on day one, but to create a continuous, engaging dialogue with yourself and others.
Exactly, Ryan. I'd like to add that solo practice can be as effective as speaking with someone else, especially when you're just starting out. For instance, try setting up scenarios where you practice daily English conversation in a relaxed environment. Speak about your hobbies, favorite movies, or even narrate your thoughts as you go about your day. One method that really worked for me was recording myself during these practice sessions. Listening back not only helped me catch any recurring mistakes, but also gave me the confidence boost when I heard myself speak clearly and fluently. I also experimented with the shadowing technique for fluency, where I'd mimic the speech of native speakers from podcasts or movies. This method is a fantastic way to absorb natural pronunciation and rhythm. Moreover, by challenging yourself with real-life English conversations, even in simulated settings, you gradually build the habit of thinking directly in English. Over time, this approach minimizes the time spent translating in your head, making your speech more spontaneous and natural. These practices, combined with practical English speaking tips, create a strong foundation for anyone looking to speak English confidently. Keep experimenting with different scenarios and let each conversation be a stepping stone towards a more fluent and engaging way of expressing yourself in English.
One of the most common challenges I've noticed among learners is the tendency to translate every word in your head before speaking. This habit, although understandable for English for beginners, can actually slow you down and create barriers to fluency. When you constantly switch between your native language and English, you interrupt the natural flow of conversation. I used to find myself stuck in this cycle, overanalyzing my sentences and worrying about common English mistakes. This not only hindered my ability to learn English fast, but also made it hard to think naturally in English. Over time, I discovered that the key is to gradually shift your mindset from a translation-based approach to one where you learn how to think in English directly. This change allowed me to focus more on the rhythm and structure of the language rather than getting caught up in every little detail. The moment you start trusting your instincts and let go of the internal translation process, you begin to speak English confidently. It's like flipping a switch that opens the door to smoother, more spontaneous communication.
I completely agree, Ryan. The habit of translating in your head is something many of us struggle with, and it can really stunt our progress. I remember early on when I'd get so caught up trying to convert each sentence mentally that I'd lose the natural flow of conversation. It felt like my thoughts were trapped between two languages, and I wasn't fully present in the moment. That constant back and forth not only slowed me down, but also made it harder to engage in real-life English conversations. To overcome this, I started using simple yet powerful techniques to remind myself to think directly in English. One method I found effective was to immerse myself in environments where English is the focus, like watching English movies or listening to English listening exercises. This not only helped me absorb the language naturally, but also reduced the urge to translate every word. By actively practicing how to think in English, I gradually started experiencing a more natural flow in my speech, which significantly improved English fluency. It's all about reconditioning your brain to see English as your primary language of thought.
Building on that, one actionable technique I recommend is to deliberately practice thinking in English during everyday activities. For instance, while commuting or even during a quiet moment at home, try narrating your thoughts in English. This simple exercise can be surprisingly effective in shifting your mindset. Another tip is to use the shadowing technique for fluency. Listen to a native speaker and mimic their speech. This not only trains your ear, but also helps your brain to adopt English sentence structures and idioms naturally, rather than relying on translation. It's important to be patient with yourself. The goal is gradual improvement, rather than immediate perfection. As you practice, you'll notice that the urge to translate diminishes, and your ability to form sentences in English comes more instinctively. This shift from a translation mindset to thinking directly in English is one of the fastest ways to learn English fast and speak English confidently. Every small step you take in reducing internal translation is a big leap towards achieving fluency.
Absolutely, Ryan. I also like to incorporate interactive practices into my routine. One of my favorite methods is engaging in spontaneous daily English conversation challenges with myself, like describing what I see around me or recounting a short story in English. This practice not only forces me to bypass the translation phase, but also builds up my vocabulary and comfort level with English idioms and phrases naturally. Additionally, I use language apps that encourage real-time conversation, which are fantastic for practicing how to think in English without the safety net of my native language. These exercises, combined with listening to English podcasts and participating in real-life English conversations, help reinforce the new habit of direct thinking. Over time, you'll find that you no longer pause to translate. Instead, you start to internalize English as the language of thought. This natural immersion into the language is a key factor in improving English fluency and building a more confident speaking style. Keep practicing, and soon you'll notice that your mind is operating in English effortlessly, making every conversation a step toward mastery.
Now let's dive into one of the most dynamic methods to boost your fluency, the shadowing technique for fluency. This technique is all about mimicking native speakers by listening closely to recordings and repeating them aloud in real time. When I first discovered shadowing, it completely transformed my approach to learning. Instead of pausing to translate in my head, I began to listen and immediately echo the intonation, rhythm, and pronunciation of native speakers. This constant practice not only helped me understand native English speakers better, but also allowed me to pick up subtle nuances in everyday conversation. By aligning your speech with that of a native speaker, you naturally absorb correct pronunciation and learn how to express ideas in a more fluid, natural manner. It's like having a conversation with yourself where you're both the learner and the mentor, gradually training your ear and voice to match native patterns. This approach makes a big difference in how quickly you can learn English fast while feeling more confident in your daily conversations.
I completely agree, Ryan. The shadowing technique for fluency is a game changer because it bridges the gap between textbook learning and real-life conversation. I remember when I first tried it, I was amazed at how repeating after a recording helped me not only improve my accent, but also understand the flow of natural speech. Instead of stressing over every word, I focused on the overall melody and pace of the language, which made it so much easier to follow along and eventually respond spontaneously. This method allowed me to get comfortable with English listening practice by tuning in to the natural rhythm of native speakers. Over time, the practice made my speaking smoother and my understanding sharper. It's a simple yet powerful way to transition from thinking in your native language to thinking in English, a critical step for anyone who wants to speak English confidently in any setting.
Now, let's talk about how you can integrate the shadowing technique into your daily routine. The key is consistency. Start by choosing short recordings. These could be segments from your favorite English podcasts, movie dialogues, or even news snippets. Dedicate at least 10 to 15 minutes a day solely for this practice. Listen carefully, pause after each sentence, and try to mirror the speaker's tone, speed, and intonation as closely as possible. You can also record yourself and then compare your version to the original recording. This feedback loop is incredibly valuable as it helps you identify areas where you might need more practice, whether it's adjusting your accent or getting the pace right. Over time, this method not only improves your pronunciation, but also trains your brain to process and respond in English without the internal translation step. By making shadowing a daily habit, you're setting yourself up to improve English fluency in a natural and engaging way.
That's a great breakdown, Ryan. I'd like to add that when you're practicing shadowing, try to focus on different types of content to expose yourself to various speaking styles. For instance, alternating between casual conversations, formal presentations, and even humorous dialogues can broaden your understanding of real-life English conversations. Another tip is to use available resources like the best apps to learn English that offer shadowing exercises. These apps often provide immediate feedback, making it easier to track your progress. Over time, as you become more comfortable with the rhythm and flow of English, you'll notice a significant improvement in your ability to understand native speakers and respond with ease. This daily practice not only builds your confidence, but also reinforces your listening skills, helping you internalize the natural patterns of English. It's all about creating a seamless connection between what you hear and what you say, making every conversation an opportunity to shine and speak English confidently.
Let's dive into enhancing our language skills with a focus on pronunciation and grammar. One exercise that has really helped me is reading aloud, whether it's practicing tongue twisters or reciting short passages from a favorite book. This technique is excellent for honing English pronunciation tips because it forces you to articulate clearly and monitor the rhythm of your speech. I often stand in front of a mirror and exaggerate my mouth movements. It might seem silly, but it truly makes a difference. At the same time, listening to native speakers and repeating after them sharpens my accent and intonation. On the grammar side, I've found that breaking down the rules into bite-sized pieces makes English grammar made easy. Focusing on one tense at a time and practicing through structured exercises helps me quickly fix English grammar mistakes. Dedicating time to master English tenses has notably smoothed out my communication and boosted my overall confidence.
I completely agree, Ryan. For me, incorporating fun and engaging practices into my routine has made a huge difference. I like to blend pronunciation exercises with interactive activities. Sometimes I shadow a short segment from an English podcast or even mimic a dialogue from a movie scene. This method not only refines my English pronunciation tips, but also immerses me in the natural flow of speech. Additionally, I set aside time for grammar drills. Breaking down complex rules into manageable parts makes English grammar made easy. For example, when I focus on master English tenses, I work on one tense per day, creating several sentences until it feels completely natural. This step-by-step approach allows me to spot errors early and effectively fix English grammar mistakes. By combining these techniques, I've found that my clarity improves, and I'm much more confident during real-life English conversations.
Continuing on, let's discuss some more practical exercises that can be easily integrated into your daily routine. One great exercise for improving pronunciation is to choose a short recording, perhaps a podcast snippet or a news segment, and pause after each sentence to repeat what you heard. This not only reinforces English pronunciation tips, but also helps you get a feel for the natural cadence of the language. I often record myself during these sessions to compare my delivery with the original speaker, which really highlights areas for improvement. On the grammar front, I've found that deconstructing sentences is incredibly useful. Analyzing the role of each word and tense helps clarify complex rules, making English grammar made easy. For instance, if you're working on a specific tense, devote an entire session to it until you're comfortable. This focused practice is key to learning how to fix English grammar mistakes and truly master English tenses, which in turn leads to smoother, more confident communication.
Exactly, Ryan. And I'd like to add that consistency is absolutely essential for refining both pronunciation and grammar. I recently started a daily journal where I consciously apply new grammar rules. It's a practical way to ensure that English grammar made easy becomes part of my everyday routine. I then read my entries aloud, which doubles as a practice for English pronunciation tips. Setting small, achievable goals, like mastering a tricky tense or focusing on a particular sound, has helped me notice fewer common English mistakes over time. Moreover, these practices aren't just for isolated sessions. I integrate them into my daily English conversation and real-life English conversations, which makes the transition from practice to actual speaking much smoother. As I gradually build this habit, I find that my ability to fix English grammar mistakes improves and that I can master English tenses more naturally. It's a rewarding process that steadily enhances clarity and builds a more confident, fluent speaking style.
Next, let's explore some exciting strategies for expanding your vocabulary. One of my favorite methods is using an English vocabulary builder approach. I keep a small notebook where I jot down every new word or phrase I encounter during my day. This practice isn't just about writing words, it's about connecting them to stories. For instance, when I learn a new adjective or verb, I try to weave it into a short story or even a personal anecdote. This way, the word becomes part of a memorable narrative rather than an isolated term. Additionally, incorporating English idioms and phrases has made a huge difference in my language journey. Idioms like break the ice or spill the beans not only enrich your vocabulary, but also give you insight into cultural nuances. I challenge myself to use these idioms in casual conversations and even during solo practice sessions. When I speak, I often narrate a quick story that includes a couple of new words or idioms, making the language feel alive and relatable. This method of storytelling not only helps me retain the words, but also makes each conversation more engaging and authentic. It's a dynamic way to naturally integrate vocabulary into everyday language, ensuring that you not only learn, but also remember and use new expressions confidently.
I completely resonate with that, Ryan. For me, vocabulary building becomes much more effective when it's linked with real-life experiences and storytelling. I've adopted a similar English vocabulary builder method, where I associate each new word with a vivid memory or an image in my mind. For example, when I encountered the phrase, "once in a blue moon," I immediately thought of a rare event from my childhood. This personal connection makes it easier to recall the phrase later on. I also love learning English idioms and phrases because they add flavor and context to our conversations. They're not just words. They're mini stories that express emotions and cultural insights. I often challenge myself to create a small narrative around an idiom, like explaining a funny incident that perfectly illustrates the phrase, "cost an arm and a leg." This technique makes the process interactive and fun. I also experiment with various tips to memorize English words naturally by using them in daily chats or even writing short diary entries. Over time, this consistent practice transforms passive learning into active usage, which in turn helps me feel more confident during real-life English conversations. It's a holistic approach that turns vocabulary learning into a daily, enjoyable adventure.
Building on our discussion, let's delve into some practical methods on how to expand your English vocabulary further. One strategy I've found effective is to set aside dedicated time each day to review and practice new words. I use various digital tools and apps that serve as interactive English vocabulary builders, offering quizzes and flashcards to reinforce learning. I also make a conscious effort to incorporate these words into everyday conversations. For instance, if I learn a new term or idiom, I try to create a sentence or a mini-story around it right away. This active usage makes the learning process much more natural. Additionally, I find that pairing new vocabulary with imagery or even a short anecdote helps cement the word in my memory. I often use simple tips to memorize English words, like visual association. Imagine the word as part of a scene in a movie or a vivid personal experience. Over time, these practices not only expand my vocabulary, but also make my speech more colorful and engaging. It's all about creating a cycle where learning becomes part of your daily routine, turning every conversation into an opportunity to grow. By consistently applying these techniques, you'll notice a significant boost in your ability to express yourself fluently and naturally.
Absolutely, Ryan. I'd like to add that the key to successful vocabulary expansion lies in making the process as engaging and relatable as possible. For me, using English idioms and phrases in everyday dialogues has been transformative. When you integrate these idioms into a story, it shifts them from being abstract expressions to vivid, memorable experiences. I sometimes challenge myself by setting a daily goal to use at least one new idiom or expression in conversation. For instance, if I learn the idiom a blessing in disguise, I try to recount a personal story that reflects that sentiment. This method not only makes the idiom stick, but also improves my storytelling skills. I also incorporate creative exercises, such as writing short narratives or dialogues that naturally embed new vocabulary. These techniques serve as effective tips to memorize English words because they engage multiple senses and reinforce the learning through context. Moreover, discussing these new words during real-life English conversations with friends or language partners provides real-time feedback, which further solidifies the vocabulary. By weaving stories into your learning process and practicing regularly, you transform vocabulary expansion into an interactive and enjoyable journey, one that continuously enriches your language skills in a practical, lasting way.
Let's dive into how technology can be a real game changer in our journey to speak English confidently. Nowadays, digital tools have made it easier than ever to integrate language learning into our daily routines. I've been using some of the best apps to learn English that offer interactive lessons, quizzes, and even live conversation practice. These apps allow you to work on your pronunciation, vocabulary, and grammar wherever you are, even while you're commuting or taking a break. What's great is that many of these resources are designed for every level, from English for beginners to advanced speakers. I also discovered several free English learning resources online, like educational YouTube channels and language blogs, which help me learn English at home at my own pace. Plus, tuning into an English podcast for learning has been incredibly beneficial. It immerses me in authentic conversation and real-life contexts, making it easier to understand native speakers. By incorporating these tools into my routine, I feel more connected to the language and more confident when engaging in daily English conversation.
I totally agree, Ryan. Digital resources have transformed the way we learn English, making it accessible and fun. Personally, I rely on a mix of mobile apps and online platforms that provide structured lessons, along with interactive exercises. These best apps to learn English not only offer guided practice, but also track your progress, which is so motivating. I also explore various free English learning resources like online forums and social media groups where learners share tips and experiences. Learning at home has never been easier, whether it's through video lessons, interactive grammar exercises, or even fun challenges that push you to use English idioms and phrases in real conversation. One of my favorite strategies is to listen to an English podcast for learning during my morning routine. It's amazing how listening to different accents and conversational styles helps you absorb language naturally. With technology on our side, we can customize our learning experience to fit our schedules and interests, ultimately boosting our ability to speak English confidently.
Building on what you mentioned, Priya, integrating technology into our language practice really adds a dynamic element to learning. I've found that setting aside a dedicated time each day to use these apps and resources makes a significant difference. For instance, I start my day by spending about 15 minutes on a language app that focuses on vocabulary and pronunciation. This quick session primes my brain for the day ahead and helps me internalize new words and expressions. Then, during my commute, I listen to an English podcast for learning. This not only reinforces what I've learned, but also exposes me to natural speech patterns and colloquial language. I also make it a point to use free English learning resources available online. There are some excellent websites that offer grammar drills, listening exercises, and even live chat sessions with native speakers. By combining these methods, I'm able to practice effectively at home and in real-life settings, which is crucial for continuous improvement. Technology, when used consistently, can accelerate your progress and help you learn English fast in a way that feels both natural and engaging.
Absolutely, Ryan. I'd add that the versatility of these digital tools is what makes them so appealing. One day, you might be practicing pronunciation with an interactive app, and the next, you could be joining an online discussion group or watching a live tutorial on English grammar made easy. This variety keeps the learning process fresh and exciting, preventing burnout and keeping you engaged. I've also started using voice recording features on my phone to track my progress. It's amazing to listen back and notice the improvement in my accent and fluency over time. Moreover, with so many free English learning resources at our fingertips, there's no excuse not to incorporate regular practice into our lives. Whether it's a quick review session at home or a focused study period on an app, these tools help bridge the gap between passive learning and active speaking. And as you continue to explore and experiment with these resources, you'll find that your ability to speak English confidently naturally improves, turning every digital interaction into a stepping stone toward fluency.
That brings us to the end of today's episode, where we've explored how leveraging technology, from mobile apps and online resources to engaging podcasts, can truly transform your English learning journey. We hope you feel inspired to integrate these tools into your daily routine and take another step towards speaking English confidently. Thank you for joining us on Speak Up today.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Remember, the path to fluency is built one practice session at a time, and with the right digital resources, you can make significant progress right from home. Keep experimenting with these tools, and we look forward to catching up with you in our next episode. Stay curious, keep learning, and most importantly, keep speaking.